Hi, today I'm here with Naval History and Heritage Command historian Frank Blazich, who has studied civil defense and atomic testing. I have a few questions about Operation Crossroads. How could you give us some of the genesis or rationale for the test?
Crossroads really comes about following the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima on 6 August 45 and Nagasaki on 9 August 45, that the public and the military recognized the atomic effort as an Army-led project under the Manhattan Project with Major General Leslie R. Groves. The dropping of the weapon by the U.S. Army Air Forces, most famously the Enola Gay, captained by Colonel Paul Tibbets. And the Navy found itself in a position where it did not want a repeat of 1921 when General Billy Mitchell conducted well-publicized tests off the East Coast using air power to essentially destroy, quote, unsinkable warships. And it was a huge embarrassment for the Navy, and they did not want a repeat of this event. So on August 16th, 1945, Lewis L. Strauss, who's an aide to the Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal, proposed that the Navy should conduct atomic tests against warships, ostensibly to study blast effect, but more importantly, to essentially mitigate against possible slashing to Navy appropriations for post-war fleets. The Navy did not want to find itself in a position where the Army's atomic monopoly left it at a distinct disadvantage. Particularly so in regards to the idea of the Navy as the forward presence of the United States, as the principal arm of the United States in its forward defense. And in this case, strategic bombing, or strategic bombers armed with nuclear weapons, threatened to overturn that long-standing situation.
So it's interesting you're talking about how the Navy wanted to assert itself, and the services in general wanted to assert themselves in the post-war environment. Why was it, therefore, that the Army and the Navy formed this task force versus the Manhattan Project, who had invented and discovered this incredible technology?
A very good question. Now, the Manhattan Project did have naval personnel involved, particularly Captain William S. Parsons, who in Project Y, which was based at Los Alamos, Dr. Robert Oppenheimer, Parsons was essential for the actual weaponization of both the Little Boy and the Fat Man bombs, and in fact rode aboard the Enola Gay on 6 August and armed the Little Boy bomb in flight. In addition to that, there was a Navy commander, Frederick Ashworth, who was aboard Boxcar, which was the B-29 on the Nagasaki raid, who armed the Fat Man bomb in flight. So the Navy played key roles in the Manhattan Project, but not largely publicly known roles. So with that being said, the Fleet Admiral Ernest J. King, in late October of 1945, having been aware of Strauss's recommendation to Secretary Forrestal, proposed to the Joint Chiefs of Staff that we have a test, that there be a joint test of atomic weapons involving the Army and the elements of the Manhattan Project and the Army Air Forces, but predominantly led by the Navy, to test the effect of these weapons against warships. The Joint Chiefs of Staff heard out Admiral King's recommendations and decided to set up a subcommittee, a joint Army-Navy subcommittee led by Major General Groves, to kind of oversee the feasibility of conducting such tests. Now, with the subcommittee, a few weeks into its work, Fleet Admiral King created what was known as, if I get this right, the Office of Special Weapons within OPNAV, led by the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Special Weapons, and he appointed Vice Admiral William H.P. Blandy as head of this. Now, underneath Blandy was now Commodore Parsons, as well as other personnel involved in the Manhattan Project from the Navy's perspective. And this kind of became a brain trust for Blandy to make the arguments in the subcommittee that the Navy should lead this task force. And ultimately, Parsons proposed that Blandy command it. Groves was opposed to it, but the Joint Chiefs of Staff agreed that the Navy should command the task force as it constituted the majority of the personnel. There were about 42,000 people involved in Crossroads. About 38,000 were naval personnel. And since the Navy would be contributing not only the target ships, but the support ships and a lot of the muscle, so to speak, to set up this massive test, it made sense to put a naval officer in command.